Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast presented by the Golden State Media Concepts. I'm Wyatt Krieger, your host for today's episode. Before I get into all the segments today, as always, be sure to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football and visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com. As always, download, subscribe, leave a review. All of your feedback is greatly appreciated. We have a huge episode today. I've got some important news to get to as Julian Edelman, the Patriots' star wide receiver for the past decade, has surprisingly announced his retirement this week. I'm going to get into all of that and what really makes him a special wide receiver in our lifetimes. It's the heat of the mock draft season, so I feel we have somewhat of an understanding of where teams are going to go in the draft and where they can try to be aggressive or passive, but we never know. So I'm going to do my first official mock draft for the 2021 NFL Draft. That is less than 2 weeks away. I'm going to do my first position group power rankings this week. Today I'm going to talk about my top 10 wide receivers in the NFL right now, and then I'll share some more NFL news updates, some more Deshaun Watson reports coming out, and some recent signings that I like. So let's get into it. So some surprising news. Julian Edelman announces his retirement from the NFL. Every week I kind of ponder what I'm going to talk about for the show, and this week I was pretty stuck. And right on cue, the NFL, it has a unique ability to kind of have stories every week as news is breaking, people switching teams, deciding retirements, and that's what happened this week because one of the more prominent players in the league is going to be gone next season in Julian Edelman. This really took me by surprise. I feel like I should have kind of expected this more just with his age and injury history, but overall, I'm going to talk about some of his best plays as a Patriot because he had made a lot of big plays in a lot of big moments. I kind of feel bad for him just because when the news first broke, all I saw when I was reading Twitter, before I even saw the original news that Julian Edelman had retired, I was just seeing Julian Edelman Hall of Fame discussions, and I was like, why is everyone talking about Julian Edelman going to the Hall of Fame on a random Tuesday? But once I did a little more research, I saw, obviously, that he announced his retirement. I'll admit, I partook in some of those arguments once I saw them because that's just who I am. The arguments start to happen and I just jump in and kind of share my opinion. But that's not what Julian Edelman really deserves because he had a truly historic career in New England with so many big plays, and we should be honoring that and respecting that in his great career before we get into Hall of Fame talk that he's not even eligible for until 5 years after his retirement. So I want to make sure I praise Julian Edelman, and this isn't just a Julian Edelman Hall of Fame discussion because I really like Julian Edelman, and I don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame, but I really liked him as a player. I always enjoyed watching him, and he was always in the big games for the last 10 years. So Julian Edelman, he's a true underdog story. How can you not root for a guy like this? He played at Kent State University from 2006 to 2008, not really a big name school at all. And he played quarterback in college. Nothing really special, but he was a consistent quarterback, played in 31 games, and he was drafted to the Patriots in 2009 with a 27th pick in the 7th round. So a really late round draft pick. No one expected him to be anything. He he really just grinded and worked. And that's a transition you kind of see a lot in the NFL overall, just players going from quarterback, middle of the road quarterback to wide receiver, just because it seems to be an easy transition from an athlete standpoint. He had no scholarships, no NFL Combine invite, and like I said, seventh round draft pick, 232nd overall, undervalued and under-recruited since high school. So really just defying all odds throughout his football career. From 2009 to 2011, when he got to the Patriots, he didn't really play much. He was used as a special teams player. The Patriots added had Wes Welker, so he kind of overshadowed Edelman with all of his success. And he even played some slot corner in the 2011 season. So really just a do-it-all type player. Was always on special teams, was a great kick/punt returner. And when he played slot corner, he was covering Anquan Boldin in the playoffs. So that just shows where he was at early on in his career and his kind of mentality to just do whatever he could to help the team. You know, like the Patriots always say, the team, the team, the team. So he appeared in his first Super Bowl in 2011. The Patriots lost to the Giants for the second time. Wes Welker's final year was in 2012. And that's when you saw Julian Edelman's snap count kind of start to increase. He perfectly took over that kind of scrappy Patriots slot wide receiver role that is so useful in their offense. Tom Brady needs a guy like this, someone that can get open really quick, get off the line, create mismatches in the defense, and just be a reliable target for Tom. And really just those short throws, guys that are in space and can make plays after the catch is what Edelman kind of filled perfectly with that Wes Welker role when Wes Welker went to the Broncos. So after that 2012 season, so in the 2012 he becomes a free agent, and he really just went on an incredible 6-year run for the Patriots. The Patriots re-signed him to a 1-year deal for $13 million. He won his first Super Bowl in 2014 when the Patriots beat the Seattle Seahawks. That was one of the most memorable Super Bowls I've ever watched. In that playoffs, he had one of his first incredibly memorable plays that I've seen from Edelman when he threw a trick play touchdown pass to Danny Amendola against Baltimore in the divisional round. That was an awesome play that I'll never forget. Games against Baltimore and New England in the playoffs were also just always exciting because it seemed like everyone was kind of scared of the Patriots at the time when they were in the thick of their dynasty, and the Ravens were never scared, and they always played great defense, and those games were always just battles. So in that Super Bowl against Seattle, he led all receivers in yardage in the Super Bowl win. One of the best Super Bowls I've ever watched. Like I said, he had 9 catches, 109 yards, including the game-winning touchdown to put the Patriots up 28-24 before the infamous Russell Wilson interception at the goal line. He dealt with injuries the next season in 2015 before playing 2 of the best postseasons for a wide receiver in NFL history in 2016 and 2019. I'm sorry if you can hear a little bit of breathing back there. That is my dog who just came in the room. He shouldn't be a bother. He's just sleeping, but he kind of breathes loud sometimes, so bear with me there. He's with me in college for the week. So the 2016 playoffs, back to Julian Edelman, the 2016 playoffs, he broke Wes Welker's Patriot playoff record for receptions in a game against the Texans. He had 8 catches and 137 yards in the win. And then in the infamous 28-3 comeback, infamous for Atlanta Falcons fans, the infamous 28-3 comeback in the Super Bowl, he had 5 catches for 75 yards. And one of the biggest plays of the game, an insane juggling catch between 3 defenders. The pass was tipped in the air, bounced off the leg of the defender, and Edelman was able to lunge and grab at it to save it before it hit the ground with 2 minutes left while the Patriots were down 8 points. So it's just an extremely clutch play, kind of a theme we saw throughout Edelman's career. The pass could have gotten intercepted, like I said. The catch was kind of similar to the David Tyree catch that happened against the Patriots. So in 2017, he missed a lot of the season with injuries, kind of a common theme with Edelman as well. And then 2018 happened. Another great season for Edelman. He had 9 catches for 151 yards in the divisional round playoff game versus the Chargers. 7 catches for 96 yards and a lot of huge conversions and plays against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. That was an absolute classic. He was suspended during the regular season for performance-enhancing drug use. Some kind of try to use this as a criticism of his career, but people get busted for this all the time in the NFL, and you never know what the real truth is, whether he was given supplements from a trainer or he was advised to take something and he didn't know all of the ingredients. Obviously, that's kind of your job to know what you're putting into your body, but you never know the truth with those situations, so I don't like to hold that against him. He's the first wide receiver to win the Super Bowl MVP since Antonio Holmes when he won the Super Bowl MVP against the Rams in that pretty boring Super Bowl overall. He had 10 catches and 141 yards. And really, that was the last we saw of Julian Edelman in the postseason because just what absurd postseason stats he had just throughout his career. One of the best postseason players of all time. So in 2020, we kind of started to see some signs of him slowing down. He underwent minor knee surgery to miss most of the season. And then this offseason, he had just recently failed a physical. So the Patriots terminated his contract. And that's when he decided to hang up the cleats. So his knee was obviously still a concern for him. And like I said, he announced his retirement shortly after he failed that physical. So overall, he's one of the more memorable players I've ever watched in my lifetime, especially one of the more memorable wide receivers. He's a guy who's always playing in the big games. That has a lot to do with the Patriots and Belichick, but also just the desire and work ethic to be great that he had, just coming from where he did in college. One of the most clutch performers of all time. Served as a mentor to a lot of people down the stretch of his career. He defended Deshaun Jackson after his anti-Semitic comments this summer. He's kind of shown a lot of compassion and leadership throughout a lot of the social dilemmas that NFL has faced over the years. And he even defended NBA player Myers Leonard after his racial slur on a live stream. So, postseason stats. He has 118 postseason receptions and 1,442 yards. It's the second most in the Super Bowl era behind only Jerry Rice. And now when I was doing this research, I saw an absurd Jerry Rice stat that got tweeted from Field Yates, an NFL reporter. He's tweeted how, so after Jerry Rice turned 40, he had 185 catches, 2,509 receiving yards, and 12 touchdowns, all after he turned 40. All other NFL players in the history of this sport after turning 40 have combined for 2 catches and 4 receiving yards. Let that sit in. So, Jerry Rice, after 40 years old, the Hall of Famer, after 40 years old, he had 185 catches, 2,500 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. All other pass catchers in NFL history have 2 catches and 4 receiving yards combined. And guess what? Those 2 catches and 4 receiving yards are by Tom Brady and Brett Favre. So those had to be trick plays. So no receiver even came close to what Jerry Rice did after 40. That was just a crazy stat that I saw. Back to Julian Edelman. Now I'm seeing a lot of debates on how people are kind of discussing whether Julian Edelman should be in the Hall of Fame. And I honestly think this is just a silly argument when looking at his stats compared to other Hall of Famer stats and other guys that are trying to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't think he belongs in this conversation at all, and here's why. And I don't really know if this is something that people actually think, if people are kind of talking to themselves into, or if this is just all Patriots fan kind of propaganda that they're pushing out because they're always obviously going to root for their guy. But nonetheless, people are debating that, so I'm going to kind of put my input as to where he goes in that conversation. When you stack him up against some of the receivers who are projected to make the Hall of Fame and are kind of struggling to now, it doesn't look good for Julian Edelman. Here's the first example I have. Hines Ward, the greatest Steeler wide receiver, or the great Steeler wide receiver who hasn't made a ballot in the last 5 years. Look at his career stats compared to Edelman. Career catches, Hines Ward has 1,000. Julian Edelman has 620. Career yards, Hines Ward has 12,083. Julian Edelman has half of that, 6,822, a little over half. Career touchdowns, Hines Ward has 85. Julian Edelman has 36. Super Bowl MVPs, if that's the argument that Patriots fans want to throw out there every time they talk about Julian Edelman being in the Hall of Fame, Hines Ward has one too. And Julian Edelman also has one that he earned against the Rams. And then the big kicker for me is Pro Bowls. Hines Ward has 4 Pro Bowls, and Julian Edelman has 0. And people can discredit Pro Bowls however much they want, but it's not just the Pro Bowls. It's also the All-Pros. Julian Edelman has 0 of those, and that's kind of a big deal because although it's just not that hard to make the Pro Bowl, and if you are an elite receiver in the top 10 during the regular season, like around the top 10, then there should be no issue with you making a few Pro Bowls in your career. And Julian Edelman has 0. Some more comparisons, if you look at him against Chad Johnson's stats, Chad Johnson has 11,059 yards and 67 touchdowns to Julian Edelman's 6,800 yards and 36 touchdowns. Chad Johnson also has 6 Pro Bowls and 2 All-Pro awards. Julian Edelman has 0 All-Pros, and that's just another disadvantage for his ballot. All-Pros I take a lot more seriously just because they're voted by a more exclusive panel of the media, and Pro Bowl votes kind of get skewed whether they're about the fans or not. But overall, it's pretty wild that Julian Edelman was never able to make an All-Pro or a Pro Bowl in his career. Even when you compare him to his former teammate, Wes Welker, who I think was an even better career wide receiver than Julian Edelman, who I think definitely could make the Hall of Fame one day. It's just not even close. Wes Welker has 5 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pros, and 2 second-team All-Pros. He's the longest touchdown reception in NFL history, and that just goes to show you Julian Edelman isn't even the best slot receiver in the Patriots' history because you have Wes Welker's stats to argue. So overall, Julian Edelman had a fantastic career. Will be in the Patriots Hall of Fame. Will go down as one of the best postseason performers of all time. And but the NFL Hall of Fame is an exclusive group. It's more exclusive than other sports, I think. So I just don't think he deserves to be even in that conversation right now. Now, I would not rule out a Julian Edelman return to the NFL because he is 34. You could start to kind of feel I could see him kind of start to feel the itch that players do once his knee is fully recovered and feels healthy. I would not put it past him to join the Bucs before the playoffs. I really wouldn't, just because knowing I could see him just being like, "Hey Tom, I'm really feeling good," and Tom's like, "Hey Jules, why don't you come down, live with me? We'll go on a little postseason run for a little bit, and it'll be a blast. We'll win another Super Bowl." So I could see that happening. A lot of teams would probably be looking for his experience and leadership during the midseason, whether it's in 2020 or 2021. But he wouldn't be the first player to do so in the NFL history, just because he wouldn't be the first player to do that, because you know what Gronk did. You know, you've seen guys like Brett Favre come back out of retirement, and overall, he's still relatively young. 34 is pretty old for a wide receiver, but he could, in a year or two, I could easily see him coming back to the league. So overall, I think the biggest thing is obviously regular season stats matter in the NFL, and Patriots fans are trying to throw in the postseason. The biggest argument I'm seeing from Patriot fans, like I said, is that the playoffs matter way more. And it has some truth to it, because it's harder to play in the playoffs. Guys play faster, harder. Everything means more. The definition of a Hall of Famer is that you played a long time, you had a high peak, you were elite at your position, and added a ton of value throughout his career. I could only see him really checking off one of those boxes, in that he added value throughout his career just because of what he was able to do in the postseason. But when you look at had a high peak, he was never in that top echelon of wide receivers. He only really had a solid 6-year run in the NFL, and that's just not long enough in terms of longevity for a Hall of Famer. And he was never elite at his position, like I said, compared to other receivers. So I hate to break it to Patriots fans, but it's really the truth. I want to look at both sides. I understand it's a lot harder to make the Hall of Fame out of the slot, because wideouts get more of the deep targets, and slot receivers route trees are kind of somewhat limited with a shortened field and lining up closer to the line of scrimmage, but the Patriots offense keys on these slot receivers, and when you compare his stats to others, it just doesn't look good for Edelman. So, before I get to my first official full round mock draft for the 2021 draft, we're going to head to a quick commercial break. Once again, you are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast presented to you by the Golden State Media Concepts. As always, be sure to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. You can follow me at WKrieger3 on Twitter. That's WKRUEGER3. And visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com. As always, download, subscribe, leave a review. Your feedback is appreciated. I appreciate all the listeners here, the people that listen to the Golden State Media Concepts content. And before I get into my first mock draft, here's a word from our sponsors.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
How is everybody doing? Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host again, Wyatt Krieger. And now, it is the moment everyone has been waiting for. It is Wyatt's Mock Draft 1.0, my first round mock draft. I love mock drafts. You get to kind of picture where guys are going to be. You get to kind of put a picture in your head of guys in a new uniform, different combinations of quarterbacks, receivers, defensive personnel, coaches, whatever it may be, all that tied into one. I've discussed a lot of these players. I've power ranked my favorite quarterbacks in this draft. I've talked about my favorite receivers in this draft and overall prospects, but now I think it's the perfect time to go down the line and predict some picks, predict some trades, where each team will pick in the NFL draft, because it is going to be one like we have never seen before, and I want to keep emphasizing that just because it's going to be one like we've never seen before because of all of what COVID-19 did to college football last year and how many players sat out and just how big of a pool of players guys are picking from this year, because GMs have never seen anything like it, and there's a lot of guys they don't have much recent relevant tape on, and it'll just all lead to, I think, a bunch of draft boards that are all over the place and have different opinions from different scouts and different GMs. So this is going to be the mock draft where I make selections based off what I think would be the best fit for teams. This is what I would do if I were the GM of each of these teams in the league. And next week I will do one where I make choices based off truly what I think and believe other teams will do. So without further ado, let's get started with my mock draft 1.0. So with the number one overall pick, pretty easy this one. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Trevor Lawrence. We've known this since Jacksonville earned the number one overall pick after going 1-15 last season. We know this is going to be kind of the tide that turns the Jacksonville organization around. At least that's what I think. I saw a recent Sports Illustrated article saying how Trevor Lawrence described how he has no chip on his shoulder. He knows the expectations are high. He's at peace with that. So I think he just has a perfect mindset heading into his first year in the NFL. And overall, I'm going to be excited watching the Jaguars, which is something I don't think you could have said in the past 5-10 years, unless you're talking about the year Blake Bortles took them to the AFC Championship game, because they were really fun to watch then when they had the great defense. But really, it's been a lot of bad seasons in Jacksonville. So Trevor Lawrence is going number 1. He will not be attending the draft, but that is going to be such an exciting moment for all of Jags fans to finally see his name get called. So Trevor Lawrence, number 1. With the number 2 overall pick, I have the New York Jets selecting Zach Wilson, the quarterback out of BYU. I think Justin Fields has a higher chance to be better, but the overall upside right now seems to be pointing towards Wilson, and I can't argue with that, and that's where I think the Jets should go. I think they should pick this guy who has Patrick Mahomes-like potential. The level of competition he played at BYU is somewhat concerning to me, but overall just the arm talent that he brings to New York, if the coaching staff and the weapons they signed this offseason, their overall spending and aggressive mindset they had throughout this offseason, I think will be huge for him. And it's going to be exciting to see the culture that the Jets build around Zach Wilson, because I really want to see this kid light it up and do just so I can be right about him, because I know just discussing with my friends, everyone's like, who's this Zach Wilson guy? I've never heard of him. And I just try to say, Watch a game tape. Watch some of his highlights, and you'll know why GMs are raving about this kid. So New York Jets, I have them selecting Zach Wilson. That's what I would do with the number 2 overall pick. And that leaves me to the number 3 overall pick. So the 49ers, I have them selecting Justin Fields, the quarterback from Ohio State. I think this is the smartest move they could make, and would be an absolute steal to get a player like this at 3. He had his second pro day today, or on Thursday, and Kyle Shanahan was there watching. They talked after his throwing session. He did a great job of, again, showing his arm talent, just throwing on the run. And I still just go back to that level of competition, because he was at Ohio State playing against Big Ten defenses, and what he did against Clemson in that in the college football semifinal game, he was making throws that just make your jaw drop. So it's hard to see any of these good prospects doing poorly in a Kyle Shanahan offense. Like I've said, his Fields draft stock sliding is overall just nonsense to me, and the buzz around Mac Jones makes me think that this might not happen. But overall, the NFL draft is full of deception, full of rumors, and we never know what is going to happen. I just want to keep that in mind, because you have reporters talking to their sources, and they think they have an idea of what a coach and a GM like, but you never really know what's going on behind closed doors. Think about Mitch Trubisky getting drafted to the Bears. No one thought that was going to happen, and Ryan Pace kind of kept that under wraps, and he was really deceptive in the way that he went about that. So I see the 49ers and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan doing the same and not tipping their hand as to who they are going to pick. With the 4th overall pick, so just wanted to recap. Number 3, I've got the 49ers selecting Justin Fields, the quarterback out of Ohio State. With the 4th overall pick, I have the Atlanta Falcons selecting Trey Lance, the North Dakota State quarterback. So 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. That's crazy. I don't know when's the last time that happened, but that would be historic in and of itself. So I have the Atlanta Falcons selecting Trey Lance, the quarterback from North Dakota State. I think he's the biggest project in this draft, and when you group the elite prospects. So he's gonna take some time to develop, but I love his size, his athleticism, his speed. He ran a pro-style offense at North Dakota State, and he really had to make NFL-type reads and decisions. NFL insider Louis Riddick thinks that this has a high possibility of happening. He just said that the more he watches Trey Lance play and watches his film, he really thinks that this has a high possibility of happening in Atlanta. And I overall just love the idea of having a talented young quarterback sit behind Matt Ryan and learn for a year while Arthur Smith is the new head coach. I think that is the perfect scenario for Atlanta fans. Gives them something to look forward to, while also still having a very, very good starter in Matt Ryan. So The fourth pick is another quarterback, Trey Lance from North Dakota State, and I have the Atlanta Falcons selecting him at number 4. Let's move on to pick number 5. The Cincinnati Bengals will select Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle out of Northwestern. So this may come as a surprise to some people. A lot of people have Penei Sewell as the first offensive lineman taken. Penei Sewell out of Oregon as the first offensive lineman taken in this draft. But overall, when I break down these two offensive linemen, it comes down to the competition, the level of competition. And not to say that Pac-12 is just some bum conference, but look who Rashawn Slater was playing against in Northwestern. And I always look back to that performance 2 years ago against Chase Young, completely stymieing him. That says it all for me, just going up against another pro and a future defensive rookie of the year, and how he held his own as a young college athlete. I think that was just absurd how well he did. And some teams kind of see him as a guard with his kind of overall lack of size, but I think he's a hardworking, intelligent football player who will do whatever it takes and play whatever position he needs to on the O-line. And for the Bengals, a lot of mock drafts I've seen have had the Bengals taking Jamar Chase with the 5th overall pick. I don't think that'd be the smartest move. I think it's so much more important to build up your trenches, so to speak, your front sevens on both sides of the ball. And we saw what happened to Joe Burrow last year. We saw him kept taking hits. He was really vulnerable out there, and if you have Rashawn Slater, they're going to have that offensive line quarterback kind of continuity for years to come, and that would just be a lot to be excited about. So pick number 5, Cincinnati Bengals, I have them selecting Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle out of Northwestern. Number 6 overall, I have the Miami Dolphins selecting Devontae Smith, the wide receiver out of Alabama. So I think he's the best receiver in the draft. This might be a hot take just because of all the Jamar Chase buzz. Maybe it's recency bias because Devontae Smith just won the Heisman and had that incredible season that he had. But overall, I just think Devontae Smith gets open better than anyone, any receiver in this draft. And that's what I care about the most, is how well you can run your routes and get open. And it was a really complex NFL-style offense that they ran at Alabama. And it was a historic year for him. That just cannot be discredited. And I don't care if it's recency bias. I saw things that I had never seen before and never seen out of Jamar Chase. So the Dolphins, I think, are definitely going to pick a wide receiver with this pick. And I see them taking – I would take Devontae Smith out of Alabama, because you need to give Tua weapons. And you need to give Tua the best chance he can have to really see what you can get out of him for the future, so Brian Flores and the Dolphins can make a proper decision on the young quarterback out of Alabama. So number 5, I have the Bengals taking Rashawn Slater, and number 6, I have the Dolphins selecting Devontae Smith. Now let's move to the number 7 overall pick. That goes to Detroit with the Detroit Lions. So now the Detroit Lions have a lot of options to take at this point with all those quarterbacks off the board. They could go with a linebacker. They have so many needs. But I have them taking Jamar Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU. I think this is their biggest need right now, and it would be an absolute steal no matter what to get him at number 7. That's who they should take if he's still available at number 7. And after the departures of Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, they have the chance to kind of get someone who's maybe even better than those two guys. And not to say Jamar Chase is going to come in the league and just be better than guys like Kenny Golladay, but he could be. And when you look at what Justin Jefferson was able to do out of LSU and how highly regarded he was out of the draft as a mid to late first round pick, finished second in Rookie of the Year voting, and the whole season when Joe Burrow led the Tigers to the national championship at LSU, Jamar Chase was always the better prospect and the better future pro compared to Justin Jefferson. So that just says a lot about Jamar Chase's overall ability, and you're going to be getting an electric playmaker with Jamar Chase no matter what. So the number 8 overall pick goes to the Carolina Panthers. I have them selecting Penei Sewell out of the O-lineman out of Oregon. You can't go wrong with this pick. Like I said, I just debated him versus Rashawn Slater. It gives Sam Darnold protection that he really needs, and if you give him a guy like Penei Sewell, that's something he just has never had. He never had in New York, and it's the protection and the receivers that he's never had in his whole NFL career. So really just to give Sam Darnold the best chance he has to succeed and to show his potential, you got to get an offensive lineman here, I think. They can't go wrong with the defensive player because they have a lot to improve on that side of the ball, but you gotta kind of build that foundation on offense. Sewell is really a top 5 pick. He's a top 5 talent, at least, and one of the better O-line prospects in the last few years because he's going to be able to start right away, and he's an absolute beast. So number 7 overall, I have the Lions taking Jamar Chase, and then number 8 overall, I have the Carolina Panthers taking Penei Sewell. Let's move on over to number 9, the number 9 overall pick. I have the Denver Broncos getting their quarterback in Mac Jones out of Alabama. Depending on how the draft goes, the Broncos could have a great shot at Justin Fields, which would be crazy to me. But Mac Jones is no slouch, and I project the Broncos to take the best quarterback available at this spot, no matter who it may be. And I could see them trading up if the market is starting to show that. And if other teams try to kind of slip in there, then the Broncos could be screwed, so to speak, without a quarterback prospect. Mac Jones can still sling it, can still make reads at a high level. He's an intelligent guy, and he'll be able to play right away, I think, which could lead to a possible quarterback competition with Drew Lock, which I think would be exciting. Who doesn't love a good quarterback position or a competition? And you really just need to give Vic Fangio another chance with a different quarterback other than Drew Lock, because this is somewhat of a make-or-break-it year with Vic Fangio. If he has another really poor season, really below 500 season, then I could see him getting fired or being on the hot seat. So it would be unfair to him if you didn't get him another quarterback, another option there. So I have the Denver Broncos at number 9 overall taking Mac Jones. And then we move on over to number 10, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. We all love the Cowboys, right? I'm obviously kidding. I don't love the Cowboys, but I love this pick that I'm about to say that they should take, and that is Caleb Farley, my guy, the former Hokie. I think he falls to Dallas. This is about where he's projected. I've seen a lot of the injury concerns start to come up now just because of Caleb Farley's injury history and his more recent injury that caused him to miss his pro day. But overall, you could go with Patrick Surtain out of Alabama. That might be the safer pick. But Farley's athleticism is just too good to miss out on. And that's all you read about Caleb Farley. He's a freak athlete. Chris Collinsworth said today he runs faster than anyone he's ever seen, which I thought was pretty ridiculous. And as a defensive back, he just has that overall athleticism to make up for any gaps he has in his coverage ability. But overall, he's a man-to-man guy. Will be able to play zone just because of his speed, like I said, and he's going to be a lockdown corner no matter where he goes. So the Cowboys, they need to bolster that secondary and shore up and stop getting thrown all over so Dak Prescott can have a little bit of defensive support. And like I said, scouts are raving about his speed, and the overall potential for him at cornerback is through the roof because he can line up anywhere on the field. So number 9 overall, I have the Broncos getting their quarterback in Mac Jones, and then number 10 overall, I have the Cowboys taking Caleb Farley. So we move on to number 11. We're out of the top 10 now. We move on to number 11. The number 11 overall pick, I have the New York Giants selecting Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher out of Miami. I think he'll be a great complement to Leonard Williams on the D-line. The Giants would have one of the more complete defenses in the NFL if they make this move. Not saying Jalen Phillips is going to immediately be a star. He's somewhat of a boom or bust pick, but the potential is there, and the Giants need help on defense. I could see the Giants kind of try to target offensive line to help project Danny Jones, or maybe go after another receiver to pair with Kenny Golladay. But overall, they need to shore up the rest of that defense. They have some promising young players, and Jalen Phillips would just add to that potential and culture that Joe Judge is building in New York. So number 11 overall, Giants selecting Jalen Phillips, edge rusher out of Miami. Number 12 overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock. They traded back in the draft with the Dolphins. That's not a trade I hypothesized. It's a trade that actually happened already. So the Eagles I have them selecting Jalen Waddle, the wide receiver out of Alabama. And I would be really happy if this happened if I were an Eagles fan, because many Eagles fans wanted Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith, but this is a good settlement considering the assets they got from trading back and then still being able to get insane wide receiver prospect in Jalen Waddle, because his blazing speed just sets him apart from any other wide receiver in this draft, and his size, I think, has put him over Devontae Smith's 170-pound frame in some of people's draft boards. So that, who knows if Jalen Waddle is available, but in this draft he happened to be in my mock draft. So if he is, the Eagles would be foolish, I think, not to jump at the prospect of grabbing Jalen Waddle, because Jalen Hurts needs someone like Waddle badly, and he needs a reliable wide receiver. And if Jalen Waddle really develops into form and gets a full training camp, a healthy training camp, if that hip is all squared away, then he's going to be an absolute star. So Jalen Waddle, number 12 overall pick, going to the Philadelphia Eagles. So just to recap some of my last, the first few picks in this draft, the first 12 picks in this draft, I've got Jags taking Trevor Lawrence, Jets selecting Zach Wilson, Justin Fields going to Ohio State, Trey Lance, another quarterback, going to the Atlanta Falcons, 4 quarterbacks in the top 4 picks, Cincinnati Bengals selecting Rashawn Slater, out of the offensive tackle out of Northwestern, the Dolphins selecting Devontae Smith with the number 6 overall pick. Lions selecting Jamar Chase with the 7th overall pick. Number 8, Carolina Panthers taking Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle. Number 9, Broncos getting Mac Jones. The 10, Cowboys getting Caleb Farley, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech. And like I just said, number 11, Jalen Phillips, and number 12, Jalen Waddle, to the Giants and Eagles, the NFC East foes, respectively. So, before I get to the second final kind of stretch of my mock draft, we've got another commercial break. So, again, this is the GSMC sports podcast or football podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. You can follow me at WKrieger3 and visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com. As always, this podcast is presented by the Golden State Media Concepts. Download, subscribe, leave a review, and we will be right back after this short word from our sponsors.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wyatt's Mock Draft 1.0. I just went through my picks 1 through 12 for the 2021 draft, what I would do if I were the GMs of these teams. But now we have the second half of the first round to get to. As always, you are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger, as this is Wyatt's Mock Draft 1.0. And be sure to download, like, subscribe, listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Play, or on our website at gsmcpodcast.com. So, let's get to pick number 13 is where I left off. We have the Los Angeles Chargers on the clock with number 13. Now, I have not had a trade up in this draft, and I know that's highly unlikely that there won't be a trade till 13th or 14th pick, or when I do have my first trade. Stay tuned. But that's just where I see these teams' needs and where I see these players available at. So I'm just going to go with it. In next week's draft, I will have a lot more trade-ups and a little more wonky scenarios. But nonetheless, let's get to the number 13 overall pick. So the Chargers are on the clock, and now they have an opportunity to make one of my favorite picks in this draft, or what would be one of my favorite picks in this draft, and that is for the Florida tight end, Kyle Pitts. Now, I've said for the last month that Kyle Pitts is my favorite draft prospect in this entire draft because he's a unicorn when it comes down to it, and his freakish athletic ability is going to set him apart in the NFL for sure. But if the Chargers are able to get him, I know the Chargers need offensive line help and they want to protect Justin Herbert, but kind of opposite of what I thought the Bengals should do. I think they need to go get this guy because you add Kyle Pitts to that receiving core, that's already one of the best in the league. And the Chargers let Hunter Henry go this offseason. He's now in New England. It would make their offense, I think, close to unstoppable, at least in the passing game. And like I said, it would be the pick of the draft if he falls this far. Justin Herbert gets a reliable target that they're going to be able to do so much with. And I think Herbert really would want this. And if their new head coach and GM and quarterback are all kind of in continuity with this draft, then this is where I think they would go if Kyle Pitts is available. So Kyle Pitts goes to LA to the Chargers with the 13th overall pick. What a great selection that would be. We now have the number 14 overall pick, and that is goes to the Minnesota Vikings. I have them selecting Patrick Surtain, the cornerback out of Alabama. I think this is a guaranteed contributor right away, and he doesn't have the injury concerns. He has a lot of longevity. He's 6'2", 202, great size for a corner. He had 38 consecutive starts at Alabama with Nick Saban, so you know that means he's as reliable as they come, and there's just no real injury history there. So he's going to be, that's not a concern, and he's going to be a guy that you can count on to start week in and week out in the NFL. Not a lot of interceptions, but overall he was all over the field, and quarterbacks were pretty scared to throw to him in college. Other than when I watched that Florida game in the SEC Championship, he got targeted a little bit, but overall he's as solid a pick as they come. Another for sure starter right away, I think, and just the overall cover ability that the Vikings truly need in that secondary because they just haven't had that since really Xavier Rhodes had one of his better seasons in Minnesota. So the Vikings sure up the back end of that defense, and then I have the Chargers with number 13 taking Kyle Pitts, the Vikings with number 14 taking Patrick Surtain. Number 15 overall pick. My first trade, everybody. Let's put the trade sirens up because this is my first trade of the draft. That was my attempt at a NFL draft jingle when teams are on the clock. But I have the Jets trading up with New England. So the New England goes back to 24. This is one of the Jets picks that they got from the Jamal Adams deal to Seattle. Seattle traded their first-round pick in this draft for Jamal Adams. So New England goes back to 24, something Bill Belichick has done before, and then the Jets, I think, select with the 15 overall pick Micah Parsons, the Penn State linebacker. This is my first trade in the draft. Like I said, I think Parsons, if the Jets can get him here, he has blazing speed for a linebacker. He's great in coverage. He can rush the passer, do anything that a modern-day linebacker needs to do. And when you look at the Jets' offseason needs, they addressed D-line, they addressed wide receiver. They're going to address quarterback with that first overall or the second overall pick. And now they address the defense. And C.J. Mosley didn't play much last year, but if you pair Micah Parsons with C.J. Mosley, that linebacking core, oh my gosh, I think that's one of the best in the league. If Micah Parsons can develop into the player I think that most people think he can be. Like I said, he can do all sorts of things that you need linebackers to do. And they're really eager to get C.J. Mosley back because I think if you have those two guys in the middle, in the heart of your defense, they're going to be able to do a lot of great things. And Robert Saleh coaching them, think about that. Think about how good Robert Saleh did with linebackers in San Francisco with guys like Fred Wagner. Woo! If they get their hands on Micah Parsons, look out, NFL, because that Jets team could be really good in a few years. So number 15, I have Jets taking Micah Parsons. And number 16, I have the Cardinals selecting offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw. Another Hokie is off the board. Christian Darrisaw was a beast. I watched a lot of him last year. Just always was carving up holes in the defensive line. Virginia Tech's running back Khalil Herbert just had a field day running behind Darrisaw. And this will shore up the protection for Kyler this year because Cardinals are in somewhat of a weird spot. And I think they are in a playoff or bust mode. They have a lot on the line. And Kyler Murray arguably has the most pressure on him compared to any other NFC West quarterback or player, mind you. So I have them taking Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle. He can play guard. He can play tackle. I think the versatility that he has is key for teams, and just the overall size and athleticism. He's a beast, and he's going to be another guy that can start right away. He's really a top 10 talent, and if the Cardinals can get him at number 16, what a steal that would be. So I've seen the Cardinals are looking for more receivers possibly. They added A.J. Green this offseason, so I don't know if that'll be a concern in the first round, but 16th overall pick, offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw to Arizona. Then we move on to number 17. The 17th overall pick is the Las Vegas Raiders. They are on the clock, and I have them selecting J.C. Horn, the cornerback out of South Carolina. This is a guy whose draft stock has continued to rise leading up to the draft. The Raiders desperately need help in the secondary, and J.C. Horn's a guy that's going to be NFL ready to go right away. He has a dad who played in the NFL in the 1990s and the 2000s. That's something John Gruden probably loves, and he has a note of. You could see the Raiders trade up for a QB, but I think this is the smartest move they could make just with their car and the trust they have in him and that they've shown in him this offseason. They have other needs at O-line and linebacker, but overall, the Raiders have been known for the last few years of just getting torn apart in the secondary, and I think J.C. Horn has the best chance of stopping that issue in Las Vegas. So J.C. Horn, the cornerback out of South Carolina, I have him going to the Las Vegas Raiders. We now move on to the number 18 overall pick. I have the Miami Dolphins selecting a wide receiver. So the Miami Dolphins have 2 first-round picks this draft and 2 wide receivers in my mock draft 1.0. So they added Devontae Smith in the first round. This is number 6 overall pick. But if they add Rashad Bateman to pair up with Devontae Smith, that's 2 really young, bright wide receivers that Tua Tagovailoa will be able to throw to and target. And I really like Rashad Bateman. He's another guy that just got open all the time. He was open all the time at Minnesota. His releases are great, so you can't really jam him or else he'll just blow by you. He's a huge catch radius, and he's reliable. He had 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns in his last full season at Minnesota in 2019. So 17 overall, I have the Raiders taking J.C. Horn, and then 18 overall, I have the Dolphins selecting Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. The number 19 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, I have the Washington Football Team selecting Travis Etienne, the Clemson running back. Now, this pick is kind of out there just because of the depth the football team currently has at running back. But I don't know. I don't know if you could pass on Etienne at this point. He's just too elite of a talent, and he did it at the highest level at Clemson. I would normally be on the front line saying, don't pick a running back in the first round. But it's somewhat in the late first round. The Chiefs had success with the late first round pick of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And Travis Etienne is a huge threat in the pass-catching game. I think he has an easy comparison to Alvin Kamara. So if Travis Etienne can reach his full potential in the NFL, that he can be that kind of player. Just how good Alvin Kamara is, and the fact that he keeps getting brought up in comparisons to him, I think is telling. It adds a kind of big playability to the Washington offense, a team that added to their wide receiving core and now add a dynamic playmaker in Travis Etienne. So I have the running back from Clemson going 19 overall. And then we get to the number 20 overall pick. My team, the Chicago Bears. This is what I've really wanted them to do in the draft, and this is what I think they will do. So I have them selecting an offensive tackle, and that is Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. The Bears need a new tackle despite not having a direct need at that position right now. And I think they're going to be able to target the quarterback that they want in Kellen Mond in the second round. So I think the best bet is to go off after one of these top O-line prospects, and Tevin Jenkins is a beast. Charles Leno and Bobby Massey are the current tackles in Chicago, but Massey could easily lose his job. He's a guy who's getting older and older and is really out of his prime at this point. He's really physical in the run game, and he's a really strong lineman. That's what you see a lot of conversations about him, is his overall strength. But the Bears kind of need this foundational piece on the O-line and to get more production, because you add Tevin Jenkins from OK State to O-line core of James Daniels out of Iowa, who was hurt last year, and Cody White here. I think that immediately is one of the league's youngest and brightest offensive lines in the entire league. And the Bears are going to be a ground and pound team this year, and they're going to have to run the ball, so you need to have that depth regardless at that position if they want to be successful in the trenches. So with the 21st overall pick, I have the Indianapolis Colts selecting Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver out of Florida. He is very good after the catch, and I remember watching him against Alabama in the SEC championship game. He had 8 receptions, 153 yards, and a touchdown. Had almost 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last season in Florida. Similar production to Rashad Bateman. And the Colts need to bring in more talent and more weapons to Carson Wentz, because they have one of the more complete rosters, and I would say that wide receiver is probably their biggest deficiency at this point. So I have the Colts selecting Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver out of Florida. And then number 22 overall, I have the Titans selecting Kwity Paye, the D-end out of Michigan. This will really help officially bolster that front seven. And overall, they need to put more pressure on teams on third down to kind of play the style of game that they want to play, which is getting the ball to Derrick Henry, owning the field position game, and just getting the defense off the field. And I think Kwity Paye immediately helps this need. They added Bud Dupree this offseason, so you have Bud Dupree now and a top D-end prospect. He didn't play much last year, but he had his last full season. He recorded 6.5 sacks and 15 tackles for loss. That was the year that he really kind of burst onto the scene. But so we've got number 21 overall, the Colts selecting Kadarius Toney, and number 22 overall, the Titans selecting Kwity Paye. That's a great name to say too, Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye rolls off the tongue. So with the number 23 overall pick, if you don't remember, the Patriots traded back with the Jets in this hypothetical mock draft. So the Patriots are on the clock now at 23 overall. And I have them selecting Dylan Moses. And now this is maybe a reach. I truly think that. But Bill Belichick likes highly intelligent guys. He was labeled as not much of a playmaker after last season, but I don't know if Bill Belichick needs playmakers. He needs guys that are disciplined and savvy football players. And he has first-round talent for sure. Just the experience at Alabama alone leads me to believe that he's going to be a solid starter in the NFL. But there are some injury concerns. He kind of seemed to have lost a step after his injury 2 seasons ago. But overall, I think this is like a high IQ player that Bill Belichick has been looking for a while now. And I think if he can get him at 23, he will be happy with that. So 23, Patriots selecting Dylan Moses. And then number 24 overall, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting the running back from Alabama, Najee Harris. So Najee Harris is a running back that I was fascinated by throughout the college football season. He was a part of that historic Alabama offense that I've been talking about for a while, but I think this is a great fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers, considering they just lost their starting running back in James Conner. And they're going to need to go back to being a running team because you just don't know what Big Ben's going to be able to do throughout the course of a full regular season. I could see them trying to target one of the quarterbacks in the draft at this point, but overall, just having Najee Harris there, he's not going to be around for long this late in the first round and then early second. So that would be a perfect fit. Takes a lot of pressure off Big Ben, and I think the Steelers kind of got away from their identity at some points last year, and they stopped being a running team, and that came back to bite them because, like I've said, you need to be a complete team in the NFL. You need to be able to do all things well, and the Pittsburgh Steelers couldn't run the ball. And part of that is because of James Conner, but part of that is just because of the overall identity of the offense. So you add Najee Harris back to the mix, and I just think that's a seamless fit. He's a tough, smart player. He's a freak athlete. He can run through you, can jump over you quite literally, and he can get around defenders. He's got breakaway speed. And overall, the stats speak for themselves for his career in Alabama. So number 24 overall, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Najee Harris. And 23 overall, the Patriots got Dylan Moses in the trade back. So now, on to pick number 25. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are back up in this draft. They're going to select a pass catcher for Trevor Lawrence, and that is Ole Miss wide receiver Elijah Moore. So Elijah Moore was a star at Ole Miss last year. He drew a lot of comparisons to A.J. Brown just because of the similar schools and the overall skill set. He's a big play wide receiver, one of the more polished receivers in this draft. Overall, when watching his highlights, just the tough catches he makes consistently stick out to me. And the Jaguars need to get Trevor Lawrence some more weapons. Just right now, they don't have enough in DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault. They have a great running back in James Robinson, but I think Elijah Moore can be that guy to complement Trevor Lawrence really well. And I think he's a guy that Trevor Lawrence will be able to build trust with and kind of just throw the ball up to him. So Elijah Moore, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, going number 25. Number 26, I have the Browns selecting Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. What a name for that is. The Notre Dame linebacker. So now, think about this. The Browns linebacking core could have two of the coolest names in the NFL in Taki and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. That's two great names right there. So the Browns don't really have any glaring needs, as crazy that sounds, on their roster. But linebacker and cornerback are probably the likely focuses in this draft. They have Denzel Ward, but getting another cornerback, a nickel corner, or another cornerback out wide would be huge. He's 6'1", 215 pounds, and he's just going to be an immediate contributor to the Browns defense. He's an intelligent player from Notre Dame. And this Browns defense only reloaded this offseason, so that would be a great pick. So 25, I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Elijah Moore, and then number 26, the Cleveland Browns getting Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Number 27 overall, the Baltimore Ravens are on the clock, and I have them selecting Terrace Marshall, the LSU wide receiver. They could go Rondale Moore here, but I think Marquise Brown kind of fits that small, speedy wide receiver role that they have. And Marshall has big-time experience from a really good SEC program. LSU wide receivers always have worked out in the past, so you just can't go wrong with a track record there. And overall, he's got a strong build, 6'3", 200, great size, can be a true number one NFL wide receiver. And the Ravens need that sort of pass catcher, that big body, someone that Lamar Jackson can really trust and throw the ball up to, because they just don't have that right now. So the Ravens need to address the wide receiver. I don't know if they'll do that in the first round, but just with where they're picking, this would be the best choice available in my eyes. So next we have the number 28 overall pick in the New Orleans Saints. I have them selecting Trevon Moehrig, the TCU safety. So the Saints are going to likely be a defensive-minded team this year, and just teaming up Moehrig with Marcus Williams is a great duo in the secondary. He had 4 interceptions and 62 tackles in his last full season in 2019. Really what sticks out to me is he just flies around the field. He can learn from an already talented secondary in New Orleans with Marcus Lattimore and the guys on that defense. And overall, I think the Saints need to be looking to build that secondary, build that defense in that high-powered division with a lot of great offenses for next season. So 27 overall, Baltimore selecting Terrace Marshall, and 28 overall, the Saints selecting Trevon Moehrig. We're down to our final 4 picks of the first round. I've got the 29 overall pick up. The Packers are going to select Rondale Moore out of Purdue. This might be my favorite value pick in this draft, because if this were to happen, oh boy, defenses need to look out. If Aaron Rodgers has a guy with this kind of speed, with Devontae Adams already on the field, I mean, that would just be unfair. So the Packers have been taking running backs in the draft. They took a quarterback last year in the first round. They need to get Aaron Rodgers some weapons if they want to win now. And you don't know the future of Aaron Rodgers. You don't know when he might want to leave Green Bay. So getting Rondale Moore could just kind of help keep him there for the next 2-3 years at most. But Rondale Moore, man, he's got that Tyreek Hill type speed, and if you pair that with Aaron Rodgers, I just don't see how that wouldn't work. And he was an absolute star in Purdue. So Rondale Moore, if he slips this late in the draft, no matter who's getting him, is getting an absolute steal. So 29 overall, Packers selecting Rondale Moore. Number 30 overall, I've got a cornerback selected by the Buffalo Bills. Greg Newsome, the corner out of Northwestern. He is a first-round talent through and through. This pick would really shore up that Buffalo defense and kind of provide someone who can contribute alongside Trey White. The Bills' defense was a solid unit last year, and this would really make them better right away, just because I think Greg Newsome is another guy that can start and play immediately, and just having that second kind of lockdown corner presence alongside Trey White would make this team absolutely lethal on both sides of the ball. The Bills have been able to find talent in the draft lately, and Newsome kind of falling to them at 30 would just be a blessing for them, and I can't see them passing up on this corner out of Northwestern if he does. So 29 overall pick, Packers selecting Rondale Moore, and 30 overall pick, Greg Newsome, the corner out of Northwestern, going to the Bills. So my final 2 picks, we got the Chiefs and the Buccaneers on the clock. The 31st overall pick, I have the Chiefs drafting Walker Little, tackle out of Stanford. This guy is another boom or bust type of pick. The Chiefs need to replace the veteran departures that they had in the O-line, and Little has some experience concerns. I'm not going to lie. He made only 19 starts since 2017, but overall, this is a guy that you're going to need to coach up, and he's a project. He's a project type draft pick. So he's praised for his agility and athleticism. And I think if Andy Reid and that Super Bowl winning staff gets to coach and develop Walker Little, then I think that would be great for Patrick Mahomes, because we saw what happened to them in the Super Bowl when their key starting O-linemen were out, and it was not pretty. So with the final pick in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft, number 32 overall, the Buccaneers will select Alex Leatherwood, the offensive lineman out of Alabama. Really just is an anchor. He was an anchor for one of the most historic offensive seasons in college football history, was as reliable as they come. He's 6'4", 315 pounds, has really long arms, has great experience in the SEC, one of the top college football conferences, and the Buccaneers can really never have too many offensive linemen, and just having that depth and joining a championship organization, I think Alex Leatherwood would be a Buccaneer for quite some time. So just to recap my 12 through 32, 13 through 32, I've got the Chargers selecting Kyle Pitts, the Vikings selecting Patrick Surtain at number 14 overall. I've got the Jets trading up with New England to select Michael Parsons, the Penn State linebacker, at number 15. Number 16, I've got the Cardinals selecting offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw. Number 17 overall pick, I've got the Las Vegas Raiders selecting J.C. Horn, the cornerback out of South Carolina. And then the Dolphins selecting another wide receiver in Rashad Bateman with number 18. The number 19 overall pick belongs to the Washington football team. And I have them selecting Travis Etienne, the Clemson running back, star of the national championship and college football playoff of the last 3-4 years. Number 20 overall pick, I have the Chicago Bears selecting Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma State. 21 overall, I have the Colts selecting Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver out of Florida. I have the Titans selecting Kwity Paye, the D-end out of Michigan. And 23 overall, I have the New England Patriots in that trade-back scenario to select Dylan Moses, the linebacker out of Alabama. The Pittsburgh Steelers grab their running back and fill that need right away with Najee Harris at 24 overall. The Jaguars add a weapon for Trevor Lawrence and Elijah Moore, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, at 25. And the Browns add to that defense in selecting Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, number 26 overall. Number 27 overall pick, I have the Ravens selecting Terrence Marshall, the LSU wide receiver. And number 28 overall, I have the New Orleans Saints selecting Trevon Moehrig, the TCU safety. Number 29 overall, one of my favorite picks of this entire Wyatt's Mock Draft 1.0, the Packers selecting Rondale Moore. Number 30 overall pick, I have Greg Newsome, the corner out of Northwestern, a guaranteed starter right away. You heard it here first. I'll guarantee it. He's going to start right away, and he is going to the Bills at 30. Then I have the Chiefs drafting Walker Little, the tackle out of Stanford, and the Buccaneers selecting Alex Leatherwood, the offensive lineman out of Alabama, with the 32nd overall pick in the NFL draft. So before I get to my final segment of the day, I just wanted to say once again, you are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast presented by Golden State Media Concepts. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. Visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com and to download, subscribe, and leave a review to all of our podcast platforms. All of the feedback is appreciated. I'll be right back after this quick word from our sponsors.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. This is my final segment of the day. We're going to get into my first position power rankings of this podcast that I've done, and before that, or after that, I'm going to get into some basic NFL news updates. But first, I'm going to talk about the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. My opinion, I think this is one of the more debated non-QB position groups in the NFL within, just because I think of all the variety of skill sets wide receivers can have. And a lot of this is really up to preference with the top guys, because you can value route running, you can value speed, you can value size, you can value contested catchability, you can value secure catchability, overall consistency. So I'm going to kind of get into my power rankings for the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL heading into the 2021 season. So without further ado, the number one wide receiver in the NFL is Davante Adams. Davante Adams was uncoverable all year last year, and a lot has to do with being with such a great quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, but it was really just the perfect duo. And in the red zone, they were unstoppable. The way he just released off the line of scrimmage and got separation right away from all of these corners that were trying to press him. 18 touchdowns. It was literally every week in fantasy. I would watch him and just be amazed because he would score week in, week out, week in, week out. He had 1,300 yards, 18 touchdowns, and cemented himself as the number one wide receiver in the league in 2020. He's almost like the perfect combination of size and speed. That 6'1", 220 frame with just lightning quick feet. So I don't think a lot of people would argue that Davante Adams is the best receiver in the league right now, just based off of his performance in 2020. Number 2, another one that may be a little recency bias is Stephon Diggs, another extremely productive season from the wide receiver. He finally got out of Minnesota after being with Kirk Cousins, and he got paired with a young star in Josh Allen, and they both really kind of emerged together as just two top players in each of their positions. So Stephon Diggs had 1,535 yards last year, 8 touchdowns. With him, his just route running, I think, is very, very good, and it's better than a lot of these other receivers listed. And overall, just the consistency he has, you always expect him to show up. So I really think Stephon Diggs separated himself last year, and just the overall consistency that he plays with week in, week out, it's hard to argue with. Number 3, I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill. I think just the overall impact he has on the field is second to very few people in the NFL, and just what he does to defenses and what he does to kind of just keep defensive coordinators on their toes, I think is incredible. The speed, he's probably the fastest player to ever play in the NFL when it really comes down to it, which is pretty cool that we're watching that right now. We're watching a player that's as fast as he is in his prime, because it truly is just completely different than anything else I've seen in the NFL with his speed and the way he runs. So teams really kind of just have to bring safety help, and I think the overall impact he has on the field, when you combine that with Travis Kelce and then Pat Mahomes, it's just an unstoppable force when all things are clicking, like you saw for most of last year. All right, my number 4 and 5 receivers. I got number 4, I got DeAndre Hopkins. I think he makes some of the more incredible catches of any of these players listed. He makes tough catches. He makes one-handed catches. He makes contested catches. He had the Hail Mary against Buffalo last year. That's absolutely incredible with 4 guys draped over him. He's really just an exciting player to watch, and you can't really argue with DeAndre Hopkins. It makes it even funnier to realize that Bill O'Brien traded him from the Texans. So number 5, this might be a little outdated, but I'm going to go with Julio Jones. He really hasn't been himself the last 2 seasons, but when he gets moving, he's an absolute freight train. One of the more rare combinations of just size and speed that I've ever seen in this league, and the emergence of Calvin Ridley on his own team has kind of overshadowed him, but he's still a generational talent and one of the best receivers of this generation. And I think we have to put some more respect on Julio's name just because of some of the injuries he goes through, and he's not always there year in and year out. I think when he's healthy, when he's lacing him up on Sunday, he's going to be a problem. Number 8, I'm going with a youngster, rookie A.J. Brown. Brown is... nope. We're going to number 6. I'm sorry about that. I skipped my notes. So number 6, we got Allen Robinson. Consistency with him. He makes contested difficult catches. I really want to see what he can do with just somewhat good quarterback play, which is kind of frustrating just because a lot of these guys listed here have really good quarterbacks, but he's still only 27. His releases are getting better each year. He's becoming uncoverable, and he's really reliable. He plays week in and week out, and I just think this is a true number 1 wide receiver, and his numbers the last 2-3 seasons prove that he's the 6th best receiver in the league, at least. Number 7, I'm going to go Odell Beckham Jr. He's coming off a torn ACL, but he's still the most talented receiver I've ever seen. One of the few players in the league that can just take a slant 80 yards to the house at any time. He's incredibly elusive and fast, and I think he's maybe the best in the league with yards after the catch. So number 8, I'm going to go A.J. Brown, the Tennessee Titans wide receiver. He's great. He's so fun to watch. He scores touchdowns, so important to their team. He had 11 last year, which I think is huge, just being a threat in the red zone and being able to score when it gets tight and contested. He's still so young. He's only 23 years old. His strength, his just overall strength as a wide receiver sticks out to me. He had a lot of plays last year just bouncing off tackles and making defenders look just inferior to him. And he's a really clutch player, so I love A.J. Brown, and I have him as my 8th best. Number 9, I've got Keenan Allen, one of the league's top route runners year in and year out. He catches touchdowns, finally has a upper echelon quarterback in Justin Herbert to throw to him. So I'm really excited to see what he's able to do with another year of Justin Herbert. And then number 10, no Michael Thomas on this list. It's Justin Jefferson at number 10. And I do really think that. I do really think Justin Jefferson deserves to be in this conversation. He broke Randy Moss's rookie receiving record, which I think is just telling of its own. Randy Moss is my all-time GOAT of receivers. He easily could have been Rookie of the Year last year, finished second in the voting, has so much potential left. Another guy that is just always open. And I kind of just see a lot of similarities with him and Devontae Smith coming out of Alabama. So Justin Jefferson is off the board. So those were my top 10 wide receivers. I'm going to go through them real quick. We've got number 1, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham Jr., A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen, and Justin Jefferson. So may have forgotten a few people, but I'm okay with that list. So Deshaun Watson, there's a little bit more of an update. One of the 22 women dropped their case after they were asked to disclose their names. Last week, Deshaun Watson's lawyer pleaded them to do so. There was another emergency hearing to determine whether the remaining lawsuits should be amended. Had been scheduled for Wednesday at 2 p.m. in the 113th District Court, but ended up being canceled. There were 11 lawsuits total amended on the Harris County District Clerk's website, and 3 more have been amended as of Wednesday morning. And the opposing lawyer's statement on Tuesday, he said that while Watson may now claim he had consent to do what he did to these women, in their minds, he didn't have consent. So I'll try to keep everyone updated as much as I can on that situation, but we're just getting small tidbits. I'm honestly tired of updating people about the Deshaun Watson. I really just need to see the truth, and I need to see the right information. There were also a few signings that I like in the small bit of free agency period that is left. Jadeveon Clowney, he got signed to the Browns. I think this is a great move for Cleveland. He's a cheap, low-risk, high-reward signing. He's not the same person that he was when he was the number 1 overall pick, but when you put him opposite Myles Garrett, I think that's going to be lethal because Jadeveon Clowney was just not productive last year on the Titans, but the Titans had no pass rush. I've talked about that for a while, and it's going to be hard for him to produce when he's the kind of marquee guy on your defensive front. Now you team him up with Myles Garrett. That's just an even more lethal unit already just because of the name and the presence. Also, get this. They have 3 first-round picks, 3 number 1 overall picks in Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, and Baker Mayfield, all drafted within 4 years of each other. That's the first time that's happened since 1997, so that was a pretty cool stat. The Bucs re-signed Stephen McClendon, the D lineman, to a 1-year deal. He was a rotational player on the Buccaneers last year, so more of the same, bringing the band back together. The Cardinals signed former Steelers running back James Conner, who is going to be there to replace Kenyon Drake. Solid signing, but they really just need to get better at running the ball if they want to make the playoffs and become a more complete team. The Bucks also signed Giovanni Bernard. That's just going to be weird to see Giovanni Bernard in a jersey that is not a Bengals jersey, in a helmet that's not a Bengals jersey. Cordell Patterson has left the Bears, one of the best kick returners in the league. He will be gone. He will be going to the Falcons. And that's pretty much it in terms of signings. So once again, thank you everybody for listening to today's show. You are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast presented by the Golden State Media Concepts. My name is Wyatt Krieger. I had an awesome time doing the show today. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. And you can follow me at WKrieger3 and visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com. As always, download, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Play, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a review. All of your feedback is appreciated. So, everybody, again, this is Wyatt Krieger. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.